Namaste and welcome everyone to the 2002 Jyotish Love Summit. It's such a blessing and pleasure to be here with all of you to discuss this fantastic topic with some of my favorite astrologers from around the world. I just would like to quickly introduce everybody and then do some opening mantras and then we'll begin. I would like to introduce Sarbani Rath. Namaste. It's such a blessing and honor to have you here joining us from India. Thank you, Sarbani.
Ksanati, thank you.
Vanita Lenka of VL Astrology. It's such an honor and pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Simon Chokoisky, my old friend, my old teacher, and such a joy to have you here as one of my teachers. So thank you, Simon. Welcome. Namaste. And Dr. Andrew Foss, it's so nice to have you back on another summit. So excited to hear your elaboration.
Thank you.
So I will just start with some opening mantras to Ganesh Saraswati, the eternal guru. Will do a chant to the sun today, and my guru Amma. And then we will get started. Sarbani will be opening up. Om Gananam Tva Ganapatim Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upama Shravastamam Jaistarajam Rahamanam Rahamanaspatanaha Srinbanu Tibihi Sira Sadanam Vakratunda Mahakaya Surya Koti Samaprabha Nirvignam Kurume Deva Sarvakayeshu Sarvada Siddhi Buddhi Shakti Sahita Shriman Mahaganatipataye Namo Namaha Nirvignam Kuru Om Yakundendu Tusharahara Tavala Yashurvavasravrata Ya Vina Varadanda Mandi Takra Ya Sveda Padmasana Ya Brahma Chuta Shankara Prabhritir Vihir Devai Sada Vandita Saman Batu Saraswati Bhagavati Nisheshaja Japaha Om Guru Brahman Gurur Visnuhur Gurur Devo Maheswaraha Guruhu Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Om Jabakasuma Shankar Shamka Shapaya Mahadutim Tamarim Sarvapapanganam Pranatasmi Davakaram Om Jabakasuma Shankar Shamka Shapaya Mahadutim Tamarim Sarvapapanganam Pranatasmi Davakaram Om Jabakasuma Shankar Shamka Shapaya Mahadutim Tamarim Sarvapapanganam Pranatasmi Davakaram Om Ram Hrim Ram Sahasrayaya Namaha 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 Om Twameva Matacha Pitta Twameva Twameva Bandhu Chasaka Twameva Vidya Dravanam Twameva Sarvam Amriteshwari Namaha Twameva Sarvam Amriteshwari Namaha Twameva Sarvam Amriteshwari Namaha Hari Om Om Namah Shivaya. Namaste. Welcome everyone and thank you for sharing that moment with me. I'd like to open up and welcome Sarbani Rath, who's going to discuss the moon and Venus today. Namaste, Sarbani.
Namaste, Ksanati. Thank you. And shall I just share the screen now?
please.
You have to enable it. It says that host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Okay, there we go. Now try.
Just let me know whether you can see it.
Excellent. I can see it well.
Right. Okay, namaste, and thank you, Ksanati, for organizing these lovely summits, which enables all astrologers to meet and share some thoughts on certain topics. Namaste to a lot of familiar faces in the audience. Just start with the Guru Mantra 5 times, and then just one line mantra to Goddess Lakshmi, a very common mantra, which I'm very sure of you know, as we are going to be talking about Venus and relationship. Keeping in mind that we are looking at, aiming at towards the purity of Venus, which is the Goddess Lakshmi. Om Gurave Namah. 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 Om Shrim Rim Shrim Kamale Kamalalaye Prasida Prasida Shrim Rim Shrim Shri Mahalakshmi Namah. Om Shrim Rim Shrim Kamale Kamalalaye Prasida Prasida Shrim Rim Shrim Mahalakshmi Namah. Om Shrim Rim Shrim Kamale Kamalalaye Prasida Prasida Shrim Rim Shrim Shri Mahalakshmi Namah. Okay, today the topic is the Moon and Venus. So Venus, as all of you know, is the significator of desire. And by being the significator of desire, he rules love, affection, marriage, and romantic relationships. And it is not only romantic relationships, but he, in fact, governs all relationships. People who share the sun signs, the same Rashi in which Shukra is placed, you will have a harmonious relationship with each other. For example, if I have Shukra in Karka, so if I work in an office and my colleagues have Shukra in Karka, or if I work in a team project where my teammates have Shukra in Karka, in all these circumstances, it will show that we have a harmonious relationship. So all relationships are governed by Venus. He is the primary ruler of Jala Tattva, all right? That is the primordial water element, which all of you know. And by being the primary ruler of Jala Tattva, he governs Tithis and Pakshas. Pakshas, as I assume all of you know, are the periods of the moon, the 14-day periods of waxing and waning. Now, one Paksha consists of 15 Tithis, and this maps into 180 degrees, which is half of a circle. That means from Lagna to 7th house is 180 degrees, and that actually is 15 Tithis. So this precisely maps into the 7th house. And what is the 7th house? It is nothing but the Dwara or the door. And that Dwara or the door through which we communicate with the whole world. With you, with the Ksanati, with the participants, with the panelists, with our parents, with our family, with our business partners, and the most significant one. That is why the term, the significant other, comes in. The most significant one whom we communicate with in the world, that is our spouse or our significant other, our relationships. And it is because of this Jala Tattva that causes Shukra to be the significator of relationships, as Jala or water rules emotions and affections and Tithi lords relationships. So if you notice, therefore, the 7th house of the Kalpurusha is Tula, and it is lorded by Venus. And Tula itself is a sign denoting partnership. So Tithi is a very important element when we are analyzing relationships, and the Lord of the Tithi plays a very, very significant role to see how much of the water element that is there in our horoscope. Now, we are all plagued with afflictions to Shukra, and these afflictions to Shukra are nothing but afflictions to Jala Tattva. This is actually the fundamentals in Jyotish, that these are all Tattva afflictions. So whenever there is an affliction to Shukra, that means there is a blemish in Jala Tattva. The Jala Tattva is damaged. The Jala Tattva is muddied. The Jala Tattva is dirty. The Jala Tattva has dried up. If the Jala is not full and free and flowing, we are not going to have relationships flowing in our lives. Now, when we are talking about afflictions to Shukra, I'll just sum it up in just 2 or 3 lines, because the afflictions to Shukra can be manifold. But one of the common ones, or one of the important ones, is that when Shukra is combusted by sun. So what happens when Shukra is combusted? Its water gets evaporated with the heat. So when the water gets evaporated, then many times a couple often have to sacrifice their relationship. They don't want to run away and elope and get married. They would rather sacrifice and listen to what the society is saying or parents is saying. This is more common, of course, in the Oriental world and not so much in the Western world, because here still elders have some sort of a hold. The society, the friends, relatives have some sort of a hold in saying whether you can or cannot pursue in a relationship. And sometimes when societal pressure, including parental pressure, becomes strong, then often the relationship breaks. But sometimes, they go against and they run away and they get married. So if Shukra is combusted and sun is stronger, then a person would tend to make a sacrifice for the society's decision, for the family's decision, rather than saying, no, I shall, die for my love, and my love comes first, and I'm going to run away with my loved one, or I'm going to go against, a Romeo Juliet kind of situation. That does not happen here when there is combustion. We often say that when the water gets evaporated, it looks like a barbecued planet. If the Karakattvas have disappeared, then it's almost many times these people are not very romantic. It's not that they are not intrinsically romantic, but romance would be put into the back burner because the duty, the work, the society, all those things will take up prevalence. This is just one hint. Another way Venus can get destroyed is that it can get destroyed by Ketu. And who do we hear this from but Maharshi Jaimini? And he tells us that the Rajas Graha can be destroyed completely by Ketu. Ketu basically is a widow. She was married to the Lagna, and Ketu is Shunya or 0. So whoever Ketu marries, Ketu itself becomes 0. Ketu, as all of you know, is not only the widow, but Ketu is the yogi, the ascetic. So Ketu doesn't want you to get married. Ketu doesn't like Shukra, it destroys it. He doesn't want you to get married. The only time he may push forward some marriage is if he wants the lineage to continue, because there is an interest in lineage where Ketu is concerned. Otherwise, Ketu basically does not like romance, does not like you to go on a honeymoon, does not like you to have nice, stable samsara, all right? He doesn't want all those things. He doesn't want you to also have a stable home. He wants you to be, like a ragamuffin, hopping month to month from place to place, all right? Not really much interested in Venus-like things, no Shringar, nothing. Very, very Ketu dominated. Ketu can completely destroy Venus. Sadhu yogas come in. So it's beautiful if you're a sadhu, if you're an ascetic. All right, if saints have such combination, Venus with Ketu, or if Venus is in the 8th house, because the natural 8th house is ruled by Ketu. So a 2-8 axis where Shukra is, or Shukra's conjunction with Ketu, Shukra and Ketu sign, these things are very problematic, where Venus can completely disappear, and they create problems in marriages. It creates problems in relationships. Then, of course, if Shukra is cursed, Kalatra Shapa, as Maharshi Parashara tells us, so which means that if there is a Saturnine influence, then there's a lot of coldness, sexual coldness, emotional coldness, rejections in relationship. If Venus is with Rahu, that Venus is a very problematic Venus. It's a dirtied Venus. That Venus shall cross limits or will be forced to cross limits. And if that Venus is with Mars, then there can be issues about rape. Venus-Mars is a rape combination. There can be violence. Of course, in a very pure combination, it can show. It doesn't mean that when Venus and Saturn just is together, or Venus and Rahu is just together, or Venus and Mars is just together, that these things will happen in a very strong way. But at least the combination or a Graha Drishti of two of these malefics will strike off the curse. And if one of these planets is the 8th lord or Atmakaraka, then a very Drida karma from past life, and the curse will be that much more suffering. So Shukra, afflicted by at least two of these three malefics, giving you sorrow, shock, and anger. So these are many, many different ways, and there are much more other ways, Papa Kartari and Tithi Dosha, etc. We are not getting into all those things. We're going to focus on one thing, that what if my Venus is unafflicted, all right? And if it is unafflicted, yet, I am not interested in romance and love. Maybe some of you are looking at a chart and say, my Venus is kind of okay, but I'm really not into it. I'm married. I got married early. I have a stable relationship. But, my husband is the one or wife is the one who's more romantic, more into the relationship. I'm kind of detached. So you see, the mind has to allow. Are you seeking a relationship? The mind needs to seek a relationship. Mind needs to want to be in a couplehood, wants to be coupled, wants to be loved. Some people think the height of or the definition of Swarga or heaven is to have relationship or is in the arms of a woman. Some people find happiness in love. Some people only find happiness in the arms of a woman or man. Then it's a completely physical thing. So what is the mind looking for? Because I told you that Venus is the seat of desire. And from moon, we are going to see the desire, because the desire is rooted in the mind. And hence Venus's placement from Chandra will tell us that eventually what is the mind doing. Sometimes the mind will reject totally, okay? So because of that rejection thing, some people have no problem, they are married, but they will always look upon their spouse as an enemy, somebody who is an enemy. So the mind is rejecting. Nobody knows why this is happening. The mind is rejecting. So we are going to not look into the afflictions today, because, I think there's a lot of discussions about afflictions and compatibility, which will be done. I'm going to do a very simple exercise. And this exercise is to see whether where the placement of moon is, Venus is from moon. So basically, the Kendra placement of Venus is supposed to be very, very excellent. All right, because the Kendra from the moon are the tides. The 1st and 7th house is the strongest because it's high tide. The 4th and 10th house is lesser because it's low tide. But the Kendras are very strong. So when the tide is high, the water is flowing. The desire is very, very strong. So a Shukra placed in Kendra from Chandra is a very, very powerful kind of a thing. Those Thana placements, the 6th, 8th, and 12th house placements are problematic. They would live solitary lives. They may reject relationships, or the relationships may reject them. Those relationships are not going anywhere. Where Upachaya houses are concerned, it's a combination of sometimes Vriddhi, there is a lot of expanse in relationship, or sometimes they are seeking Upadesha. For example, one of the Upachaya houses, the 3rd house, is the house of Guru Upadesha. So they are seeking a mentorship, they are seeking Upadesha, they are seeking in a partner, a mentor, like a teacher who will guide them, And the Kona placements from the moon. Kona placements from the moon are not bad, but yet it is not very good. Only the Kendra from the moon is absolutely, the water flows are over there. So Kendra from Surya is supposed to be very good. So what does a Kona placement from Chandra signify? You will see that such people are seeking jnana. Now, I have accumulated a whole bunch of charts. So what I'm going to do is maybe just discuss one or two and then just mention the names to you. Many of these names will be familiar to you, that these are the people who have such a combination. And Ksanati, you please let me know when I need to stop. So we are going to first look at, so I decided, because of lack of time, I'm going to look at horoscopes which are from the Kendra from the moon, and another bunch which are in the Kona from the moon, because they actually are the main significant ones. Now I'm going to add another layer to this analysis. You can see this is the chart of the famous screen goddess and the sex symbol of the 50s and 60s, the blonde bombshell, the very, very beautiful Marilyn Monroe, who was married 3 times. And here you can see she's Karka Lagna with the moon in the 7th house, which itself is a very, very strong kind of a Jala thing over there. And you can see here is the Chandra Lagna chart, and you can see Shukra is placed in the 4th house from moon, which is a Kendra placement. But we are going to now take it to a next level. And that is, we said that the 7th house, that Venus is the seat of desire, and the seat of desire, the strongest seat of desire is in the 7th house, because that mapping comes into the 7th house. And Parashara has taught us how we must see that particular house of which the Graha is Karaka. That many houses you must see from the Graha. So the 7th from Shukra is actually the most important house to see. All right, the 7th from Shukra is where the root of all desire is. And I will see that point from Chandra. So here is the Chandra Lagna chart with Makara Rashi. You can see Shukra is placed in the 4th from Chandra. All right, but I will need to see the 7th from Shukra, which is Tula. And I will see where Tula is from Makara. And when I do that, then you can see that we are actually seeing as if Shukra is in the 10th from the moon. As if Shukra is in the 10th from the moon. Look at this, very beautiful Venus in its own sign. Now, all of you who do Chandra yogas will know that's a very good yoga. 10th from the moon is fantastic for work. And you know, it gives you Amala yoga and that kind of thing. She was, of course, a top actor. What many of you do not know, and I was just watching a very recently published documentary on her, she was really into the whole casting couch thing. So she had relationships. I have not got into names over here for, you know, avoiding all this detailing, but she has got into relationship right from her first producer, all right, to almost the entire lot of producers, directors, agents, everybody. She had relationships across. At that time, you know, when she blossomed in the 50s, probably women had to do that. I don't know. They had to do it. And that's how she came into the top. That's how she got her assignments. And of course, she also was quoted by many famous men. And the most famous, of course, is the then president of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and his brother, Robert Kennedy, who was the Attorney General. So she was actually dating both the Attorney General and the President of the United States. Lost her life at a very, very young age. All right, see, relationships, her mind is seeking that. Look at the power of that Venus. Mind is seeking that. That is Swarga. She was flitting from one to the other, one to the other, one to the other. Okay, now very quickly, this horoscope is of the famous composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Now, they said that Mozart was a very lustful person and he had many relationships, and that when he died also again at a very tender age of 30s, just like Marilyn, that he died of syphilis. But now researchers are coming out with the fact that, you know, he may not have died from syphilis. Actually, I mean, that's contentional. But you can see he is here, Chandra Lagna, all right. Moon in Scorpios. Moon is also the Bala in the chart, and Venus again is in the 4th house from it, which means in actuality, Venus is really coming into the 10th house. These people revel in the arms of the opposite sex. They revel in it. Okay. Now, look at this chart. This chart is of Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, as you know, was one of the pioneers of India's national movement and a very famous political leader. So I'm pardon me, I'm rushing through this to get as much in as possible. Again, look at this moon in Karka, his Tula Lagna, by the way, you can see Malavya Mahapurush Yoga, and moon is also 10th lord in 10th house. And that Malavya Yoga, that Shukra is 10th from Chandra. So, right, his Chandra is very powerful in its own sign, and his Shukra is also very powerful. But here again, it shows as if Venus is in the 10th house. Now, again, what does it mean? These people revel in the arms of women. Now, you'd say that he was an ascetic kind of person, which he was, but he wrote this book called My Experiments with Truth, where he said that in order to test his brahmacharya, he would sleep in a room full of naked women, room full meaning his nieces and his, these three people that you can see. But very recently, about 5, 6, 7 maybe years ago, one of these nieces, their diaries got published. And there she's written all details about how he would make these girls, 2 nieces and another one is a doctor, he would make them sleep with him, he would fondle them, then he would make one of the doctors take a bath and watch her as she's taking a bath and apply soap on her. Very perverse life, but sexuality is a very different thing. This sexual desire or the desire for love, these are all very different things. And you can see that Venus and 10th from Chandra. Okay, nobody escapes this. Look at this chart. This is also of Jawaharlal Nehru. He was our first prime minister, and Jawaharlal Nehru was together with Gandhi was two among many who were in the forefront of a national movement. And here also again, see, that was Tula Lagna. Gandhi was Tula Lagna with moon in the 10th house, and Nehru is Karka Lagna with Shukra in the 4th house. So again, Shukra in Tula, 4th from Chandra, and exactly like Gandhi, see, it's in the 10th. So now, Jawaharlal Nehru was absolutely a ladies' man, as we call it, and he was absolutely a charmer. Not as such perversion, but has lost his wife pretty early to some disease. And after that, he had a string of relationships, including Padmaja Naidu, and there was a live-in relationship with Padmaja Naidu, but probably his most famous relationship was with Lady Edwina Mountbatten, and it said that many people say that it was platonic, but they were very close. And Lord Mountbatten gave it overlooked it because he said that that was actually good because it would enable good diplomatic relation with the Indian national movement because Nehru was at the forefront of it. So now, very quickly, here is actually Osho, Bhagwan Rajneesh. Here we can see it's a first house. Venus and moon are together in the first house. So which is the 7th house from Venus? The 7th house from Venus then becomes Mithuna. All right. So when 7th house from Venus becomes Mithuna, that means from moon, Venus is in the 7th. Now, this is very high tide. What did I tell you? Though the Kendras from Chandra are all very powerful tidal zones, the 4th and 10th still is a bit lesser, but the 1 and 7 axis, so that if Venus and moon are 1 and 7 with each other, either together in 1 or in the 7th from moon, then that is very, very powerful. Again, as I said, all of you know most of the characters that I'm talking about here. And Osho's thing was very famous because he followed a principle of Ajivika, where people were having, sex was kind of quite openly endorsed out there in the community that he had. So I don't want to go into too much into that. This is the chart of, again, Venus and moon in the first house. This is a chart of a screen goddess from India, and she was also the former Miss World, Aishwarya Rai Bachchan, extremely beautiful. But when she stepped into Bollywood, that's the Indian film industry, so beautiful, so desirable, she was actually, really like Marilyn, in a sense that I think almost everybody had a relationship with her. So you can see that very clearly out there here in the moon Venus being in 1-7 from each other. Here is another Indian actor called Salman Khan. This man is the heartthrob, and he has a string. All the beautiful women were his girlfriends, but he's still unmarried, including the previous horoscope. They also had a relationship. And here you can see over here, Okay, again, moon and Venus together, and Venus is in the 7th from moon. Now, the thing is that in all these charts, there are a lot of other combinations also. You can see, right? Moon, Venus with Mars, Aishwarya Rai has moon, Venus with Rahu, but we are not looking into the other things right now. We are only looking at this placement, and all these people have it. Here is a chart of Zaza Gabor, married 9 times, Hollywood actress, lots of relationships. Here you can see that Venus is placed 7 from Chandra. Again, a very strong Chandra in Karka. Venus is placed in 7 from Chandra. All right. And so if we do the 7th house from Venus, so actually as of Venus is with moon. I hope you got this. The 7th from Venus, where is that from moon? That is in the 1st house. Okay. So this is as if Venus and moon are together. So if either Venus and moon are together or Venus is in 7th house from the moon by this calculation, then that desire is extremely strong. This is so Zaza Gabor was married 9 times. Here's another Hollywood actress, Jennifer O'Neill, again married 9 times. Here Shukra is exalted, how lovely, in the 10th from moon. But how is it actually? It is in the 4th from moon. So it becomes very strong. It's in Digbala, 9 marriages. Okay. And I think the last one I'll show you in the Kendra is John F. Kennedy himself. Okay, Venus and Taurus, very powerful. Now, John F. Kennedy was the 35th president of the United States, the youngest president to be elected, kind of an icon, dashing, debonair in the 60s, and also while he was in politics in the 50s. But his string of mistresses and girlfriends, very well known. Many of them have come out and have actually also talked about it. All right. And so again, as I said, I'm rushing through this. Sharati, how are we doing with time?
You have about 5 minutes, Sarbani ji.
Oh, fantastic. So I want to change the tone a little bit. And I'm now going to, amongst corner placements, I'm going to now look at when Venus is placed in the 5th from the moon. Now, I'm going to just run you through the names, those people who have Venus in the 5th from moon. Here you can see this is Swami Vivekananda. Then this is Srila Prabhupada. Then this is Jagat Guru Chandrasekharendra Saraswati. All right. Then we have Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And then we have Sri Chaitanya. All right. Now, you would think that there are at least 5 or 6 of these gurus out here who all have Venus in the 5th from Chandra. I told you also earlier that when Venus is 5th from Chandra, the corner placements are not so great. But let's do this mapping out here. In this mapping, as I said, we have to see the 7th house from Venus because that's the seat of the strongest desire. And if Venus is 5th from the moon, then the 7th house from Venus becomes 11th house. And what is the 11th house? 11th house from moon is very good when we are doing it as Raj Yogas. They will give a lot of benefits, they give proper vriddhi. But when we are talking of Shukra, not in terms of Raja Yoga, but in terms of love and relationship, that karakatva of Shukra, then this becomes a Harabhava. Everything is lost because 11th house is Harabhava. So this love and relationship is lost over there, totally lost. So you can see they are then looking for jnana. They are looking for knowledge. And this is in the chart of Swami Vivekananda. This is in the chart of Srila Prabhupada. This is in the chart of Jagat Guru Chandrasekharendra Saraswati Swamigal. This is in the chart of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, right? And this is in the chart of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that is a very interesting thing. Now also, which I will just, I've got this chart here, but I will just tell you verbally. Similarly, the Dusthana effects also we can see when Shukra is 2nd from Chandra. All right, when Shukra is 2nd from Chandra, then in effect, it becomes 8th from Chandra. And you can see this is in the chart of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa, who actually said that, oh, I will not touch Kamini and Kanchan, meaning women and money. These are two things I shall not touch. Such as sadhu, I will totally not touch. I will shriek and go away from that. So eighth house Shukra, a sadhu Shukra. The second eighth house, even from Lagna, when we see a Shukra in the eighth house, we say a sadhu Shukra. We also find this combination in the horoscope of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. Then you can also have, say, placements of Venus being in the sixth house from moon. So when Venus is in the sixth house from moon, then in reality it is coming to the 12th house from moon. Here you can see it is in the chart of Sri Satya Sai Baba, and it is also, I think, in the chart of Ramana Maharishi. I have not put that over here. So you can see Venus pays 6 from moon, Satya Sai Baba, Ramana Maharishi. What is happening? 7th from Venus becomes 12th house from moon. Total rejection. Absolutely, really, they like to reject women. They don't like women at all. And in this case, Shukra in 2nd from Chandra, what is happening? In reality, is falling into the 8th house, total Sadhu Shukra. We are seeing that in the case of Ravi Shankar, Sri Ravi Shankar, and also in the case of Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa. All right. Now, I did not show you the other things because of I just thought that let me go in detail on 1 or 2 of the factors. And I know I rushed it, but I wanted to show you that there were so many horoscopes and so many charts which kind of fits into it. So all the sadhus, they either have Venus 5th from moon or 2nd from moon or 6th from moon, either those sthana, 11th house, maps into 11th house, or maps into 8th house, or maps into 12th house. Okay, so this just shows how the mind is perceiving Shukra, how the mind is perceiving. You can say, oh, wow, in Sri Ramakrishna's case, wow, Shukra exalted. Well, Shukra exalted does not mean anything over here because it maps into the 8th house from Chandra. So the mind is totally rejecting that Venus and completely. So how is the mind treating? Is the mind rejecting? Or does the mind feel that it's only happy and blissful? The heaven is in the arms of another man or a woman? Or is it a total sukha to be in love and to have a home and happiness with a woman? Or do they just reject it? They don't like to bear to touch a woman. The mind doesn't want to have anything to do with a woman. So I leave you with these brief pointers. Actually, it's a very deep topic. Brief pointers for you all to think more on it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarbani ji, so much for that fantastic elaboration. So thought-provoking on Venus and Moon, and so many things can be noticed. So would any of the other astrologers like to comment on the presentation or share anything at all?
It was a fantastic one. That's what we can say.
Thank you.
I agree.
Very insightful. Thank
Very
you so much for sharing your insights. Yes.
Should have given her 2 or 3 more minutes. Anyway, it's good.
So,
Just stop sharing my screen.
oh yeah, I already cleared it. Thank you, Sarbani ji.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was so helpful. I'm sure a lot of people who are viewing this right now are running a lot of analysis to see their Venus and Moon positions in the same way. So next, I would like to welcome Vanita Lenka, who's going to do an elaboration on is the relationship built to last? Welcome, Vanita ji.
Thank you so much, Ksanati. I'll just share the screen. And thanks to the ones who are watching right now. Sorry, 1 second. Is it visible now?
Yes, it looks wonderful.
Great, thank you. I'll be closing my video. Okay, so the topic being, is the relationship built to last? So I'll be taking you through to two examples also towards the end, and a little bit about the remedies. So the disclaimer is that astrology is complex. It is impossible to understand how an aspect or placement will play out in the synastry between two people without first understanding the individual charts of the couple involved. So we all must start with the understanding of the couple who have approached the astrologer, right? So as you all know, the houses involved are the first house and the seventh house to start with, and there will be other houses also involved here. So the first house is called the Adi Udyam Deham Rupam, because of which, we get attracted to people and the other person also gets attracted to us. That's the major importance in a marriage or a relationship. So it actually is about the beginning of, or initial imagination, inspiration, aspiration. Udhyam means outgoing energy, the power of taking the initiative. And Deham is about the physical attraction, physical state of health. Rupam is about the identity, mode of expression contained within. So these are the major parameters that we have to see when we are looking into the marriage or relationship. Seventh house being the Kalatra Sthanam, Kalatra Bhava, represents the polarity of the first house. As we all know, it is right opposite 180 degrees. People know about it very well, of course. And this is also, the seminal fluid dissipation. It means that, you are going to be having that kind of, it is the depression, basically. If the first house is the vitality, this is the depression. It encourages onward progress, while the seventh stands for the break-in journey. If the first house is onward journey, it is the break-in journey. So all these we have to see how the sexual activities will be, how you are inclined towards relationship, how deeper the implications will be, how you are actually attached to that person, to your wife, to your husband. The seventh house is also about the partnership, the other people, also business, trade, the professional advancement, which we are not going to be touching this time. And this is about the actualization of the materialization of the relationship, how you are going to be having the relationship and the sexual attachment. Now, we all know marriage is the panigrahana. That is one of the sacred samskara one performs in his or her life. That is the association of two partners, which is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. These are the attainment of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, for which the partners are actually getting together. And dharma is represented by 159. We all know. Artha is, I'll take you through to the other slide. Yeah. So here you can see dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So dharma is 159, and artha is represented by first, second, fifth, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th houses, because from the seventh house, if we see, 11th house is the fifth house. So that's how you should be going through. Kama is also first, fourth, fifth, seventh, 12th houses, and moksha is first, fifth, fourth, ninth, 10th, and 12th houses. Now, you have to have mental and spiritual and the physical ability to perform, to continue or carry on along with the relationship. So physical ability will be seen from first, fourth, 7, 10 houses, the Kendra houses, and mental would be from 1, 2, 5, 8, 11. And spirituality we'll see from first, 5, 9, 10, and 12 houses. So these are the houses that we have to consider when we are looking at the astrological aspect. See, spiritual is controlled by sun, and mind by moon, and material by sun and Jupiter. And Venus being the Karaka, of course, we have to see, and we have to check the parameters. Basic parameters that we have to check is first house, first lord, seventh house, seventh lord, from ascendant, moon, the Karaka. Venus for a male chart, and Mars for the female chart, the basics, of course. Now you have to check the affliction, if there is any affliction, and if there is anything which is involved, which leads to the break in or separation in the relationship. So we have to go in for the affliction on these, especially on these houses. Fifth house, fifth lord, we have to check if we are considering the romance, the love relationship that starts with. And also 11th house, 11th lord. And fifth house is also, very important for your imagination, basically, how creative are you? And we have to see the nakshatras, Venus and Mars are in, which are very important again. And these are a few aphorisms that I have mentioned, which are from the classic texts, of course. Houses 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. Venus, Mars, 7th house from Venus, Mars, Jupiter for overall happiness. And astrological incompatibility of 7th houses, that is Rashi and Navmansha charts, we have to see. And of course, we will go for the how the things are with the in the relationship compatibility wise, like if you have any kind of afflictions. Kuja is Mars, of course, and Shukra is Venus, significators of wife and husband, of course. So we have to see that also. And the primary houses, as I said, why, we have to check the afflictions here, because they will be the ones who will be deciding about the relationship status, how your relationship with each other is. Suppose you are seeing the Kutumba Bhava, second house. So you have to see how, how the Kutumba is, like how the relationship, the members, family members are going to be, because it's an addition to the family also. So you have to check the second house for that reason. Fourth house is house of happiness, domestic, comforts. So that is also very important, and mental adjustments. So it becomes very important again. So these are the houses involved I have mentioned, which see, Venus and Mars together will bring about good things also and afflictions also. So this is something which we have to see where they are. So in the first house, second house, fifth house, sixth house, they are not considered to be that good also. And they bring about a harmony and disharmony both, depending on the kind of affliction they're having. The more the affliction, the disharmony is more likely. The harmony is when, we have good amount of planets looking, good benefic planets looking at these two. And this brings about a lot of strength. And if there are certain other aphorisms, like if the Lord of the Ascendant is in Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, it inclines to more than one union. Good planets in the third house. Third house is, for the spouse, the ninth house, the partner's ninth house. So that is also, very important. If it is beneficially, having an interaction with 5th, 7th, 11th, first houses, as much, we can see, it actually is considered in the judgment of desires, marriage, and friendship. Now, separation, there are certain parameters which we have to check whenever, there are afflictions, as I said, in the second house ruler, seventh house ruler, the activation of the 6th house or the 12th house, 6th house litigation, 12th house is ending. So this brings about a lot of complication in the relationship. And Ketu conjunct Shukra or Kuja, that is Venus or Mars, will also bring about obstacles. Even Rahu will do that, but Rahu will be amplifying other things as well. Difference of opinions between the two, bickering, quarrels, violence, these could be the reasons of separation. Or maybe, getting no children at all, getting no male issue, severe health issues, economic difficulties, short-term or long-term separation. Maybe, somebody is staying somewhere away from each other, and then, they become very, they just decide to part ways. So these could be the reasons. So that is how we have to see all these houses. So dissolution of marriage by divorce, desertion, or death could also be the causes. And any kind of artificial agreement between horoscopes of the man and the woman by furnishing wrong date of birth of either of the two, or by giving a wrong horoscope for matchmaking, proves merely harmful for the two persons. So never do that. I request everyone. So if Rahu is aspecting Shukra or Mars, delay or denial of marriage is there. And even if they are together, there will be something under the wraps, behind the curtain. And if at all Shukra is with Ketu, Kuja, then they are, of course, going to be having problems, or separation is likely. Only if Guru is looking at them, the Jupiter, then only there is some kind of compromise we can see. Buddha, Mercury, Ketu, Kuja, if they are located in the same sign, possibility of separation is indicated. Buddha presides over speech, nervous system, expression, and that's the reason, when there are confrontations and there are fights and all arguments. So Buddha has lots to say whenever they are, having complications. So these are the places where you can have complications if Ketu Mars are together, Ketu Venus are together. So these bring about a lot of problems in the relationship. Rahu, Saturn, Mars, these are actually the Papa Grahas. So definitely the toddler astrology would say that yes, they will cause the problems. Now you have to judge the mental affinity from the 11th house, as conjugal affinity is to be judged from the 7th. Okay, so 7th and 5th house, they are the main houses. So from the 7th, 11th is the 5th house. So that is also very important. And check the signs, where the planets are in which signs, barren signs or fruitful signs. So if at all there are, barren signs activated, so there will be a lot of affliction, delay, deny in the marriage. Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, these are good, the watery signs, they are fruitful signs. So whenever, there are planets in these signs, 1st, 5th, 7th houses. So these are going to be giving, fruition of love affairs and the vice versa. Gemini, Leo, Virgo, on the other hand, are the barren signs. So it can retard accomplishment of marriage, of course. Now, as per the Sukha Nadi, Dasha periods of the Lord of the second, planets in the 2nd, 7th Lord, planets in the 7th, associated with the rulers of the 2nd, 12th, 7th, Antradasha. Dasha, Antradasha, we have to check. So if this kind of a relationship is there, then there is a separation indicated. Also, we must check the condition of the 6th sign from Venus and the sub-period of the 8th sign from Venus. Also from ascendant, I check from both, and Mars also. So there is a complication in the relationship, or there is a death inflicting time in relationship. Actually, death inflicting means it's a maraka time, or it's a death of the relationship, or complications can come up. Now, the most important divisional chart after D9, of course, everybody has spoken about D9 a lot. The most pivotal function is the divisional chart is D30, the 1/30th division of a female chart. So if in a woman's chart, the Trishamsha Lagna falls in the sign of Kuja, Shani, or Surya, that is Mars, Saturn, or Sun, along with the malefic planets influence, then there are strong chances of separation due to disharmony or death of the partner. Of course, in the classic text is mentioned death of the partner, but nowadays it's disharmony also, depending on the Desh Kala Patra also, not to forget. I have taken the example of Jennifer Aniston. As you all can see, her Lagna is Libra and the Lagnesh is conjunct Saturn. And here we can see the ascendant Lord is also, at the degrees which are closer to the, 1 second, let me, okay, so here Mars is the 7th Lord, which is at 0 degrees conjunct Moon, and her discord was actually, which culminated in divorce later, was on the 2005. Okay, so she actually finalized her divorce. Just a sec, I'll just tell you. Her divorce was in 2005, March, wherein it was Moon Jupiter Dasha. So Moon is conjunct the seventh lord in the second house, which is the eighth from the seventh, and Jupiter being retrograde conjunct Ketu, that is in Rahu Ketu axis, is also actually Rahu is not, it's just got cut. Sorry about that. That's why I was wondering the degrees, So they are going to be having divorce in this period that was indicated of, because it is also forming a Kalsarpa for her. All the planets are in the Rahu Ketu axis. And this is why, we must also check the condition from Venus. From Venus, if you will see, Venus as it is hemmed between malefics. Rahu is here, so Venus is hemmed between malefics. And from Moon, seventh lord is Venus also. From ascendant, the seventh lord is conjunct Moon and a debilitated Moon, and is at 0 degrees. So this is also one of the reasons Mars is looking at her fifth house as well. So this also brings about affliction. Ketu is looking at her fourth house. So this also brings about problems and agony in the family life. I look at the Ketu's and Rahu's aspects as well. And Rahu is looking at Mars, the seventh lord also, which brings about a break or discord in relationship. Ksanati, you can prompt me whenever the time is up. Thank you. Then we have the D30 chart here. And here we have, again, if you will see, it's the Vargotama chart, it's the Libra rising here. And here as well, we have Jupiter conjunct Ketu. This is the D30, sorry, I'm looking at the Rashi chart. So the Rishamsha chart is having the affliction again, because Venus is in the 12th house in the right opposite Rahu and Ketu. So this is also one of the afflictions, and the Lagna rising is ruled by Kuja, that is Mars. So D30 chart, whenever has a rising of ruled by Mars, Surya or Shani, then it is also indicative of a lack of marital bliss. I will not say that there will be a break in marriage, but there can be some indication of, that we can just take it as a parameter. But definitely Mars in the second house being the Lagnesh, and also Venus in the 12th house from the 7th house is also indicative of the marital problems and discord. And next is Johnny Depp's chart, which is also the in chart these days. Everybody wants to discuss his chart. And as we all know, what is he going through? So Johnny Depp has, I would like to mention, like Marilyn Monroe, it is the same one, the same ascendant, which is rising, that is Cancer rising, which Sarbani ji just showed. And quite similar kind of chart, because she also had Rahu in the 12th house and Ketu in the 6th house, with the Venus in of course, Venus was in the 10th house, but here Venus is conjunct Mercury. So Mercury and Venus combination brings about more relationship or multiple relationships also. So here also he had multiple relationship, and Rahu in the 12th house makes one fall prey to the drugs and all. So he was from his childhood, at the age of 12, he started to do all this. He started to smoke, and he lost his virginity at the age of 13, and he was known for flouting authority also, and had problems. He had a very vagabond kind of a life. But yes, basically the problem is that the Lagna is hemmed between Mars and Rahu, and is aspected by a retrograde Saturn. Mars and Rahu, whenever, are in the 6th house and 8th house from the 7th as well. So this brings about a lot of complications, and it brings about defamation as well, because Rahu is also looking at the 4th house. And also, here Jupiter and Saturn is looking at Jupiter as well, which is the basically the ruler of, or we can say the significator for the good things, the happiness, and whatever, the grace that he was supposed to have was always missing. And but Jupiter looking at the 1st house and his 5th house gave him children, so that is something which was good. So Lagna hem between malefic, Saturn aspecting Lagna and Jupiter, this all brings about complications. And Rahu, Jupiter actually gave him the birth of his daughter in 1999 as well. So if the chart is different, just understand that this is sidereal zodiac. It's not tropical astrology that I'm doing. So it will be different than the tropical one. So his he also started to date Amber Heard in 2012. So 5th Lord Mars, Antradasha, Rahu Mars started at that time. So 2012, he started to date, and 2015 in Jupiter, Saturn, he got married. Saturn being the ruler of the 7th house. So he got married, and Saturn, also the 7th Lord is looking at the 9th Lord. So that is also like the Panigrahan, we say that, there was an exchange of vows in Hindu culture, but they exchange the rings, of course. So that is also the 9th house involvement. And the divorce, of course, was filed by her in May 2016, when it was Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury. So Jupiter is Jupiter, Saturn, of course, are involved here. Saturn is looking at Jupiter, and Mercury is conjunct Venus. And this also, brings about some, because they are at war also, Venus and Mercury are quite together, like closely conjunct. So, and 2020, he had this dasha, which gave him this defamation as well. So this is what is his horoscope like. And in case, you want to understand one more aspect, you can add up all the longitudes. I've not taken this example here, but, I've added, suppose it's a Sagittarius rising at 20 degrees. So we add the 7th house degrees plus the 7th Lord's degrees and the Karakas degrees. So suppose it is Sagittarius rising 20 degrees, and Gemini is the 7th house, which is of course, it has moved 60 degrees plus 20 degrees, because the 7th house degrees would be the same. So we add up. So 20 degrees plus 60 degrees is 80 degrees, 7th house. So 80 degrees plus Mercury is a ruler of the 7th house in the Sagittarius rising. So we add up 80 degrees plus Mercury, suppose, is at 17 degrees. So we add up. So we come to 80 plus 17, 17 plus 30 degrees, 47 degrees. So now we add up the Venus's degrees, which is the Karaka for female. So we add up. So that is also in Taurus sign, which is at 7 degrees, which is like 37 degrees. Now we add 80 degrees plus 47 degrees plus 37 degrees is equals to 164 degrees. We come to 164 degrees, which means that it is 5 signs it has passed, it's crossed. Now is the Virgo sign 4 degrees, which is Uttara Falguni. So if the moon's nakshatra, Janma nakshatra, if is, suppose we take as Bharani, so Uttara Falguni is the Sampat nakshatra. So then it becomes a good compatibility, like same thing we have to do for Mars. For the female horoscope, and we have to see how sometimes the male is happier than the female in the marriage or in a relationship. So we have to check both and then see how they are forming a connectivity. Is it a 64th Navvansha, 22nd Reshkan, where this degree is falling? So the relationship is not going to be lasting one. So that is one of the parameters that we check, if it is a Vipat or a Vardha nakshatra, we have to check. Then there will be lack of cordiality as well. Well, I will be maybe, sharing with Ksanati the whole, the calculation. Later you can get it, maybe a slide I'll add later. I just missed it because I was traveling, so I could not do it. So forgive me.
About 5 minutes, Vanita ji.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, I'll take only 2 minutes. I'm done already. So we have to be taking proper advice before marriage, and Guna Milan we have to do, and we have to study the Kundlis thoroughly, and study the future prospects. And Dasha, Antradasha, of course, is the most important. And lastly, the Muhurta, the transit positions we have to choose for a good marriage. These are the remedies. And also, we can have, the Shiva Parvati Puja done, or Rudra Abhishekam we can get done before getting married. That also helps. Muhurta is a very important one. If you have a suitable Muhurta, suitable time, suppose moon is transiting your 8th house on the day of marriage of either of the partners, then it becomes a problematic marriage also. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Stop share.
Namaste, and thank you so much, Vanita. So much detail. I'm just blown away by all the detail to your method.
Thank you.
So much good research went into that presentation. Thank you so much. Would any of the other panelists like to comment?
No, I mean, it was very, very, very thorough. I'm quite surprised how she managed it in such a short time. You did a very good job.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It means a lot. It means a lot coming from you.
Very
Mr.
good.
Simon, please say something. I know I was not obviously it was in a rush. I was traveling. I reached. I did it. So just.
Well, we're all
on
a clock, as Ksanati has pointed out. So we're all going to try to get the information out. So I love and I appreciate how thorough and precise you were. So yes, I loved it. Thank you. Thank you. It was wonderful.
So much.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you, Dr. Foss. Thank you.
Love
I
you.
would apologize. I have to leave actually. I have a flight to catch. So can I leave with your all permission?
Yes, don't be late. And if you're late, you were late because of love.
And I would love to hear you later. I'll go through both of yours, Andrew Sir's and Simon's, later. Thank you so much. And Sarbani ma'am, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Safe travels. Safe travels.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
So next, I would like to welcome a good friend of mine and a fantastic teacher, Siddha Deva, Simon Chokoisky, who's going to discuss both modern and ancient methods of compatibility. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and let's see. Let me share what I'm supposed to share here. 1 second. Hariom. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to discuss. Here we go. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. So it just so happens that we are teaching a class on relationships and compatibility as right now. So it's called the Divine Love Masterclass, and it's in 3 parts. We're in part 1, which is called the Personal Handicap, which means what is the stuff that we bring into relationships, the baggage that we carry that can sometimes sabotage a relationship. So even if you find that perfect person, maybe there's unresolved stuff that you have in your own life that we can see in your chart that may create problems. So we're on this part of it, and I'll talk about that a little bit later if we have time. Let me know when there's about a minute left or 2, and then I can kind of give people an intro. But let's dive right into the topic for today. These are some factors that you don't see a lot in books and in courses and stuff. By the way, I want to say thank you to everybody here who has presented. Each each of us will be sharing little tidbits. And to everybody watching, I want you to know that don't take any one combo, like, oh, I've got, Venus K2 and therefore I can never have a relationship, or, the stuff that I'm going to present here, oh, I don't have this, so therefore, no. Relationships and compatibility, like natal astrology, you have to take into account everything. So just because you have Kuja dosha doesn't mean you're not lovable, right? Obviously, just because you have one combo or another, that like a Pravraja yoga or Punarbhu yoga, which I can discuss here in a second, those things do not block you from having a happy, loving relationship. Everything is workable, everything is malleable, and we have to take the whole picture. So please don't despair if you have one bad thing. We all have stuff. Because Shani, Rahu, Ketu, Kuja have to all go somewhere in the chart. All right, having said that, let's get started. So one of the overlooked factors, can you guys see the screen? Can you see this presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. One of the overlooked factors in compatibility is Samadasha, which is when two people run the same dasha period. Not only that, but when they're running the same dasha and bhukti. So when they're very tight, within a year or two of each other, this can create a very nice kind of affinity. It's like being in the same bus with someone, or, rooming in college. When you go to college and you share a dorm, you may otherwise have not much in common with that person, but because you are together in the same little cubicle, the same period, you're going to begin to share. It's like putting two ingredients together in a pot, adding a little ghee, and then you start cooking it. And even though like that broccoli and the tofu are very different, they're going to start to blend their rasas, right? They're going to start to blend and exchange their chemicals and their essence to become unified. Similarly, when two people run the same dasha, and especially the same dasha bhukti, you will get that kind of effect. So sometimes that explains a relationship that you look at the compatibility and you go, why are these people together? And I've seen quite a number of charts of happily married couples who don't really pass the compatibility test on first glance. And then you see their dashas and then they're very tight in dasha bhukti. Okay. The second principle, and by the way, we can really unfold each of these if we had more time, but I'm just going to go through them, and if you guys have questions at the end, we can cover them. The second is what I call the Rashi rule, which more technically or formally is called Graha Maitri, which is the friendship of the dispositors of planets. Meaning, let's say you have a moon in Virgo and your partner has a moon in Gemini. In traditional synastry or Western astrology or even Vedic matching, that's a 4-10 aspect, 4-10 relationship. Not the greatest, typically speaking, but because the dispositors of those moon is, in fact, in this case, the same planet, it's going to create, again, an affinity. So affinity is the big word here. When we look at charts for relationships, you want to find affinity, like how these people fit together. So again, the broccoli and the tofu, you throw them in the bowl, you add some ghee, add some heat, and they start to exchange rasas. Similarly, when the dispositor of two planets, let's say your Venus or your moon, since we're talking about Guna Milan and so forth, the matching of horoscopes, your moon is in the 8th house to your partner's moon. But if they're ruled by the same Rashi, it's going to be not as bad as you would normally expect. Right? Because the 6-8 is a very difficult relationship in matching. Or if the dispositor of the two planets are friends, so Mars, Jupiter, the normal friendship enemy scheme. So I call it the Rashi rule, and I find that to be an important factor in modifying what seems to be bad compatibility, or toning down what seems to be very good compatibility. Because similarly, the two planets can be in a good aspect, but if they're dispositors or enemies, they're not going to be able to work out, right? Those spices aren't going to quite taste that good together. All right, the third factor, and again, we can really elaborate on this with examples, but I'm not going to take the time because it'll cut into our full presentation. The third thing is something I call the personal handicap, and that's what we're teaching a full course on right now, which is the idea that relationships truly mirror our own evolution. The first bhava is you, right? And the seventh bhava is your partner. But in a way, you can look at it as the sun rises in the first bhava and then it dies in the seventh. So the sun you can take as your ahankara, right? Your personality, yourself, your ego. And isn't it true? I mean, we all know this, that a part of you has to die, in a sense, to compromise itself in order to succeed in relationship. Isn't it so? So the seventh house often becomes a mirror of our own personal evolution. And so we look at the seventh house, not only for relationships, but also for the personal issues that you have to face in your life. Now, what does that mean? Well, what is the disposition of the seventh house? The standard pro forma. Does it have malefics, benefics, retrograde planets, debilitated planets, etc.? But an additional factor in analyzing the seventh house is looking at the outer planets. Now, I know traditional Jyotisha doesn't use Uranus, Neptune, Pluto because they are invisible grahas. Rahu, Ketu, of course, are also invisible, as are Gulika and Upaketu, but I find them to be very useful, especially in this yuga, in this age that we live, for analyzing deep subconscious forces that drive our behavior. And sometimes we don't even know why we are this way. And so when these grahas come together with Venus, the planet of relationships, or the seventh lord, the ruler of the seventh house, they will significantly influence how you relate to others. So one example, and I'll kind of give you here, these are the slides from our class. So we cover every possible combo, Mars, Venus, Rahu, Ketu, Mars, Ketu, Venus, Rahu, every possible combo you can have that will influence relationships. I'm going to show you one here, which we call the fatal attraction combo, which is Venus-Pluto. And this is just an example. Venus-Pluto is a combo that is intensity personified, nuclear love affairs. Oops, keeps changing here, sorry. And, the interesting things, I don't know if you're familiar, in the 80s, there was a movie called Fatal Attraction with Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. The interesting thing is that the actress herself, Glenn Close, who personified that role, who embodied that role, and I don't have it here. She has Venus-Pluto exactly opposite her in her ascendant and seventh house. Let me pull up her chart here. I apologize, I was using another computer earlier. So I just want to show you. And this is a case of good casting, where you cast someone who truly embodies the qualities of that part. And let's see. Well, you may have to take my word for it, because I'm not finding her in this computer. All right, well, you have to take my word for it, apologies. So that's Venus-Pluto, which characterizes a relationship through intensity, But because the person is constantly seeking that intense experience, it can become too much in a day-to-day relationship. And when that intense experience is no longer there, they may feel like it's not, the relationship isn't working anymore. And as you can see here on the slide, also they're 100%. If you give 99%, it's not enough. You know, you're not in it. It's 100% or nothing. So Venus-Pluto conjunctions or oppositions can create this in your own personality, right? To where you bring this baggage into a relationship, like this has to be this way. And if the other person doesn't have a Venus-Pluto configuration, they're going to look at you and be like, well, why does it always have to be, you know, 100%? And they won't understand where you're coming from. So that's part of what we call the personal handicap and how outer planets can drive our behavior. There's another example of, I won't show you the slide, but Moon and Neptune, which we call the Little Mermaid combination. And this is a person who is hopelessly idealistic. So if you have Moon, Neptune together or opposite, and we also talk about the square, the 4-10 relationship, but that has to be a very tight orb. When Moon, Neptune are together, we call that the Little Mermaid combo. And there is this sense of either that you take on damaged partners or people with, you know, addictions and issues, or you yourself are so hopelessly idealistic that, you know, think about the Little Mermaid. She wanted to go from the bottom of the ocean and to marry a human, which is, you know, someone with legs, someone who breathes air and not water, you know, this massive idealistic fantasy. And whether or not that fantasy comes true depends on how well we match you with a potential partner. If the other person also has similar Moon, Neptune qualities, then you guys have an affinity. But if they don't, they'll always think that your head is in the clouds. They'll never get you. You know, they'll never understand where you're coming from. All right. Of course, another influence on relationships is the nakshatras. I wouldn't say they're primary, but if you have the nakshatras that are quote unquote difficult for relationships, and I'm sure some of you are already thinking, oh, Dhanishta. Yeah, Dhanishta is one of them, but there are others like Hasta. Hasta is a very innocent nakshatra. It's a nakshatra of the cherub, of a young, you know, what do you call it, Cupid, who is a young boy, who's a prepubescent boy. So there's a lot of innocence that can create problems in relationships. And of course, even Pushya nakshatra is historically not good for relationships, because Brihaspati was the ruler, was always busy with his yajnas, right? He was always doing Om Bandrang Karne Meshananoyama Deva. What is it? No, not now. I'm doing puja. Hold on. Bhadram Pashyama Chimenyajadra. Nah, go away. Right? The wife is there, ready to, you know, be sexy and have sexy time, and he's busy doing his thing. That's not good for relationships. It may be good for other things. So some nakshatras will color the nature of the relationship. And if you have an affliction, say to your Venus and to your 7th house, and Pushya and Dhanishta and Kritika and Hasta and other difficult nakshatras are showing up in your chart, then you have to look at that. You have to look at that as your own kind of handicap and go, okay, what is the baggage that I'm bringing into relationships? And so that priest, Brihaspati, has to be like, okay, I have to set aside quality time for my partner and pay attention to him or her, in addition to fulfilling my duties, you know, at work or, you know, whatever it is. So the nakshatras also color the expression of the relationship. Then, of course, there are specific yogas. One of them is called Punarbhu, when you have the Saturn and Moon, or the Moon basically afflicted by Saturn, and somehow configured with the 7th house. So Moon could be the 7th Lord, Saturn could be the 7th Lord. Moon can be in the 7th, Saturn is in the 5th, right? Saturn aspects the Moon into the 5th house. Some configuration of Saturn, Moon, and the 7th house creates a Punarbhu Yoga, which is a combination for, we call it the runaway bride combo. And this is a combo where a person will have misgivings in a relationship. In fact, let me see, we have Will Smith's horoscope here because he was kind of coming up. Actually, I don't see his chart. Will Smith has this combo, and in his case, it played out where the partner had misgivings. So his partner, Jada Pinkett Smith, publicly said she never wanted to get married. She was crying on her wedding day, resisting this marriage, right? A true wannabe runaway bride. And so again, that alone doesn't mean you won't have a successful relationship. Punarbhu can be overcome easily, but you have to be aware of it in your chart, that either you or your partner is going to have marriage misgivings. There is something called Moha Yoga, which you can find in Hart Defoe and Svoboda's wonderful book called Light on Relationships. They don't call it Moha Yoga. I call it Moha Yoga. It is when Rahu's dispositor is either with Rahu or aspected by Rahu. Meaning if Rahu is in Cancer, then the moon is either in Cancer or in the 5th or the 9th from Rahu. These are the aspects we take for this Moha Yoga. And in Light on Relationships, Hart very thoroughly explains how that can affect relationships. So if you have Rahu, Venus together in a sign of Venus, it's going to create difficulty in staying in a relationship because of an excessive desire for that perfect relationship. Like the perfect lovemaking session, the perfect romantic dinner, the perfect this or that. And ultimately it can lead to, it's one of the divorce combos, potentially. So I call that Moha Yoga. It's a specific combo of Rahu Ketu affecting their dispositor in a chart. So Rahu in Capricorn with Saturn, or Rahu in Capricorn aspecting 5-9 away from Saturn creates Moha Yoga. And again, we talk about this more at length. I know we don't have a lot of time here, but I want to introduce some of these principles to you and to kind of introduce the ingredients that you can then use to cook and experiment and create tasty little dishes on your own, right? You can work with these. The final thing I'll say here is that we often look at Venus and go, oh, Venus is debilitated, so Venus is weak. Well, there's a difference between a debilitated Venus, a combust Venus, a Venus in a planetary war, a Venus that's retrograde, or a Venus that's in houses 6, 8, or 12. All of those you could say are afflictions, even though retrogression gives Venus strength, it also gives kind of an obsessive compulsive quality, right? A retrograde planet is going back and forth. And as Dr. Chadak points out, retrograde planets are not good for health and wellness, even retrograde benefics. So retrogression, it does give strength to a planet, but it also gives an obsessive compulsive kind of quality to it. But in terms of interpretation, there's a big difference between, say, a debilitated Venus and one in the 6th house or the 8th house or the 12th house in terms of how it plays out in your life. So for example, a debilitated Venus tends to tends to take a mental approach to relationships, meaning they have the list. Okay, she has to be blonde, she has to, do this, she has to make this much money, or he has to, they have a physical, sometimes superficial idea of what the partner needs to be like. A partner needs to be beautiful for a debilitated Venus. A partner needs to be, there has to be really good communication and so forth and so forth. Whereas an exalted Venus, the person has the Venus quality so exalted in themselves, they don't necessarily need their partner to be beautiful to reflect that for them. They have it within. Whereas a debilitated planet needs it reflected to them. Whereas a combust Venus has, as the previous presenter noted, has other qualities. So when we look at personal handicap or charts, we want to analyze more than just saying, oh, this is strong, this is weak. Strong how, weak how, and look at how that plays into relationships. Any questions so far? I know I just kind of ran through this, but any questions on this? From anyone in the group, in the class?
Not seeing any questions posted.
Okay, good. So the point here is that here, let me. I'm going to take 60 seconds of a shameless self-promotion here, but I'm trying to make a point with it. So on my website, decodingvedicwisdom.com, we have this course is in 3 parts. First, we cover the personal handicap. Then we cover remedies and timing, because even, like I said earlier, even if you have a lot of these handicaps, and all of us do, right? The malefics have to be somewhere. There are things you can do to, number one, become aware of them, and that takes care of 30% of it right there. Just being aware that, oh, I have an obsessive compulsive quality, or I have the hoarding combination, Moon Neptune, or I have the serial monogamous combination, or whatever it is. And so I have these tendencies. Then that takes care of 30% of it. The other 70% is taking steps to ameliorate. So that's remedies and timing, and there are remedies in, Lal Kitab. There's many different schools and traditions for remedies. What I will say about it is that there are many easy remedies, right? You can throw a penny or a quarter in a moving river. You can do this, you can do that. I don't think that stuff works as well. That works to kind of shift the karma around, but it doesn't necessarily burn the karma. As it says in the Yoga Sutras, the commentary to the Yoga Sutra, that a person who attains asampragnat samadhi, for that person, the seed is burnt. So a person who sees the face of God, like Moses on top of the hill, they are forever changed. They can never revert to the same old person, which is why when you see gurus, sometimes, we all have there are many famous stories of gurus who fail, right? Who become embroiled in sex and this. They haven't seen it. They haven't been to that level. And I know maybe I'm saying something controversial here, but the point is, when you achieve that asampragnat samadhi, you cannot go back to being who you were. You are completely changed. Similarly, when you do remedies and you're just doing, putting on this thing or that thing, and I've done all these, by the way, and this is part of how I know this stuff, or how I believe I know this stuff. You have to approach the remedy with this overwhelming desire, this overwhelming intent to create this effect. I fully put my prana, I put my focus into creating a loving relationship. And then the upaya that you do, whether it's doing a particular mantra, or whether it's feeding, people or horses or ducks or on a Friday, or whether it's, donating to young women's school or whatever it is, and you do it with such an assiduous practice that it burns that negative relationship karma. But it has to be done with that one-pointed focus and intensity. Otherwise, you're just moving stuff around. So remedies are important. Similarly, timing is important. If your Jyotisha chart, if you're running the period of the 6th house and all kinds of other afflictions, and there's no 7th house, there's no relationship in sight, then it's good to know that during that period, maybe focus on work, focus on other things, and don't try so hard for relationship. And what you find is by the time that period ends, relationship will more easily come to you. And then, of course, in part 3, we talk about the compatibility itself, how to match two charts. But I believe it's a process, and it starts with understanding yourself and your own hangups and baggage. And we've covered a couple of those things here. I've got, free YouTube videos on other aspects of the personal baggage as well. And that's it. That's it for today. By the way, again, the idea, not the shameless self-promotion here, but if people want a kind of a compatibility, easy compatibility thing, Cosmic Insights has, we wrote the modern methods here. So this is based on the techniques that we came up with, and we wrote the text on this, and you can go through core connection, soulmate indicators, hidden strengths, karmic glue, and so forth, and then get a final score. So this is available for people through Cosmic Insights. I'm not affiliated with them, except that this is our protocol. All right, any questions, thoughts, or if you'd like me to elaborate on any one of these things that I've covered, like what is Moha Yoga or etc.
Simon G, there are a couple questions that we have time for that I'll throw at you from the audience. They wanted to know two Moha Yoga questions. One is, please kindly tell about Rahu Ketu in forward motion. Does it cause Moha Yoga? And then the other one was, does the conjunction or aspect in any house makes it, or any particular house? I guess both concerning Moha Yoga.
Yeah, so because we take the mean node with Rahu Ketu, it's always in more or less backward motion. So I don't factor that, although I do use the quote unquote true node. There is no such thing as a true node. The true node is a more precise mean node, okay? The true, quote unquote true node takes into account more factors, more wobble of the earth and so forth, but it's still a mean node. Even though it will give you sometimes forward, sometimes, stationary and backward Rahu Ketu. But for Jyotisha purposes, I don't look at that. For the placement of the house of Moha Yoga, it doesn't matter what house it happens in, but if it is configured with the 7th house in some way, then meaning it happens in houses 1, 1, 7, or Rahu is conjunct the 7th Lord and forms the Moha Yoga, then it becomes especially influential on relationships. And I'll give you an extra little tidbit. For Moha Yoga, if the Lords of 6, 8, or 12 are involved, then it can absolutely influence relationships in a negative way. Then you definitely want to look at it. So for example, we have a client, actually a participant in the class, who has Rahu and Saturn in Capricorn in the 6th house. So Saturn then becomes the 7th Lord, right? Because he rules Aquarius. He is in the 6th house. So the yoga happens in Adusthana, ruling the 7th house. And so the full meaning of that Moha Yoga will come out. It's 100% combo for divorce. Because, but not just divorce, but the people will come together for the sake of work, for the sake of duty and honor, and like the relationship will be all about, have we paid the bills today? Have you taken the kids to school? It's all about the work, the dry stuff. And a lot of the juice in the relationship will be sucked out because of it. And there will be arguments because of it. So the Moha Yoga has 3 levels. A lot of the yogas that we talk about have 3 levels. Number one,
Is it just a minute or so, Simon G?
okay. Number one, does the yoga actually happen? Number two, is it configured with the 7th house? And number 3, is it afflicted by being in one of the Dustanas or having Dustana lords aspected? So there are 3 levels of severity for all of these yogas, for Punarbhu yoga, for Pravrajya yoga, and so forth. Okay. Other questions?
Let me just, Dr. Foss, any comments or questions concerning Simon's presentation?
No, it's fine. It's great.
All right. Well, I will cede my ground then to the other presenters, because I know people have to go. Thank you, Ksanati ji, for your time.
There were people asking about specific combinations, and when this video is published on YouTube, Simon's links for all of Simon's resources will be available. Just look for the description in the video.
What if Venus and Mars are in war in a woman's natal chart? So Venus Mars are a passion combo, and when they're in a war, means they're within 1 degree. So we have to see what houses they rule in your chart and what house that war happens in. But by itself, this doesn't mean you can't have a good relationship. It means you have to find someone who also has Venus Mars configured, or their Jupiter aspects your Venus Mars, meaning they bring wisdom and they help in good counsel and they help keep that under control, right? So you can find that your perfect person as long as they make that combo work for you rather than be destructive for you. So Venus Mars, that's fine. Don't worry about it, unless it's severely afflicted. Then you can do some remedies for it. But one of the best remedies is finding a partner that you're beautifully matched with, finding your soulmate. It's like Homer Simpson. By himself, he's a dolt and an idiot. But being married to Marge and having that family keeps him, relatively happy and fictional character, but it still exemplifies this principle. When you find the person you're supposed to be with, it brings out the best qualities in you. Okay.
Thank you
Hari
so
Om.
much, Simon G.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you here. Namaste.
Bye.
Dr. Foss, I'm so excited for your presentation, Matchmaking, What Actually Works. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much. Good. Well, welcome everybody. And just to remember the Guru a few times. Om Guruve Namah. Om Guruve Namah. Om Guruve Namah. Aim Saraswatyai Namah. Good. So, good. So I thought it'd be interesting to discuss some research that I did, because this whole question of matchmaking is a very serious issue, and we want to do things that work, So that's very important. So just a small advert. That's my book, Yoga of the Planets, Mantras and Philosophy. And of course, my software, Jyotisha, new version coming very imminently, vedicsoftware.com. Good. So when we look into matchmaking, there are an awful lot of tools. We've already heard actually many interesting points today. And inside my software are, literally dozens of things you can use for comparing 2 charts in various ways. But there are a few, what we could say, traditional tools that are frequently used, especially in India, In fact, I've discovered a lot of astrologers are, maybe they're only being given a few rupees, I don't know, but they tend to look at these traditional tools and they don't seem to look at a lot more else. So the question is, what are these and what do they actually work? And primarily, I want to look at this whole question of the Kuta points and also the related tests along the same lines and the whole issue of Kuja dosha. So the Kuta point system, which is called the Purottams in some parts of India, especially in the south, it has 8 tests. This is found in multiple texts. And each of the 8 tests is given a score. It starts with 1 point for the first test and ends up with 8 points for the last test. And then so that gives you a score out of 36. So it's conveniently mathematical. And then there are 4 additional tests, which are either you have it or you don't have it. And those are popular in certain areas of India, especially in the south. So each area of India has some things which are being used a lot for matchmaking considerations over the centuries. So these are the standard Kuta tests: Varna, Vashya, Dinam or Tara, Yoni, Rashyadipati or Grahamaitra, Ganam, Rashi, and Nadi. So now, some theories can be put forward that these tests are for different factors. Like some astrologers will say, well, each factor is dealing with a different issue, and these are not necessarily related to marital happiness, which may be true. It's difficult to test whether, like, for example, if yoni is sexual compatibility, it's difficult to test. I mean, every astrologer gets a few examples, but it's hard to collect a large number of them. So anyway, I thought we'd do some experiment on this. And one thing you can say is, okay, that marriage is relatively happy or unhappy. So in fact, what happened was some astrologer proposed this as a test for other astrologers, I guess, based on a set of couples who are considered to be the happy or very unhappy in their relationships. And I collected from the Astro Data Bank 135 couples. And these are couples that stand out. They either stand out as being, happy or very happy, more than the average, or very bitter relationships, according to the way that it's been presented in the Astro Data Bank notes. So this is the public. These are celebrities, so it's hard to hide, though, of course, we don't really know what went on in the private relationship. So I'm going to go through the various tests, and we'll see whether they had an effect in terms of the marital happiness. In other words, can we divide between the very happy marriages and the bitter marriages based on these tests? So the Varna test, Varna is like a color, which is usually considered to be, it's presented like caste system, there's the different caste systems. And the idea is two people should be married from the same caste. Or maybe the man should be of the higher caste, whoever came up with these ideas. This is the traditional concept. So that's how the Varna is presented when it's explained or taught. But what I found was that it works in reverse. It actually works, but in reverse. So the way it's presented, like the man has to be the higher caste, the opposite is true. Now, it could be that this is because most of the couples are Westerners, and probably almost all of them are drawn from a Western population, and therefore maybe things work differently in the West. It's possible. There is one of the texts one of the traditional texts on this subject actually says explicitly that for the foreigners, the opposite is true. It does actually say that, but most of us, I have to say, most people ignore that because, I mean, I discussed it with a few senior astrologers and they kind of, you know, it's difficult to deal with because if its opposite is true, what happens to all the rest of Jyotish? So it's not something that's popularly applied, but the mention is there. One shloka mentions it. All right, Vashya. Now, Vashya means attraction. So obviously people get together because of attraction, especially Westerners. In India may not be the original concept, but in the West, it's usually has to be at least some attraction initially. So that would probably be true for all of the couples. But anyway, if it's been used for matching, it should have some effect. But we found that this factors really has nothing to do with the happiness of the couples. I'm not saying attraction, I'm just saying the Vashya test is not related to whether the marriage was happy or not. Now, there's a very important concept called Tarabala, and this is a key concept in the Dasha interpretation of Dashas, very key concept. And the simplistic way that it's presented in the most books, if not all books, is that the 3rd, 5th, and 7th stars from the moon, counted from the moon's nakshatra, are difficult places and should be avoided. Now, in my book, there's a chapter at the end where I discuss this in considerable detail. And really what you can see is that the 3rd, 5th, and 7th places are important transformational places. So if you don't want transformation, don't go there. That's basically what they're saying. You know, don't just avoid it. But the fact of the matter is, really, if you're talking about relationship is always transformative. I mean, maybe you're looking for someone who will have absolutely no effect on your life, but that's not possible, because if your wife doesn't or your husband doesn't have any effect, his children surely will. So, you know, you can't really avoid transformation. And there's nothing particularly wrong with transformation. In fact, life would be terrible if there was no transformation. But in any case, as far as this system of comparing two moons, then this doesn't actually have any, it doesn't distinguish between the happy group and the bitter group. So that shouldn't be given too much importance. Then we get to the yoni, the so-called sexual compatibility. So what happens is all the nakshatras, there's 27, so they're put into two groups of 13 each. I mean, 13 groups of 2. And these nakshatras are assigned to an animal. So you say this is the male animal and this is the female animal. And then that leaves one nakshatra which doesn't have a spouse, you know, the poor mongoose or Udrashada. So it's, you know, you often hear astrologers saying this is a problematic nakshatra for marriage. Maybe it is. Sometimes you definitely have cases where it seems to be happening. But in any case, what the pundits have done is they've made a scoring system between all the nakshatras, and you have a score out of 4. So a perfect match is 4, and 0 match is 0, and then there's some 1s and 2s, and 2 is a kind of average. And the reality is that 88% of the couples out of the 135 had picked a partner with a score of 2. So maybe that's a kind of somewhat random suggestion. And so there was no effect of this yoni on whether the people were happy or bitter, but it was the case that 9 of the happy group had managed to pick a perfect yoni match, and only 2 of the bitter group. So that in itself is, you know, it does show something, but from a scientific point of view, it doesn't really amount to much. It's only a few people anyway. So maybe there's something here, but in most cases, people get on okay with average score. Then there's Ganam. Ganam or Gana. This is dividing the nakshatras into divine or deva, manushya, which means like human, and rakshasa, which means sort of a bit cruel, we could say. So the trouble when you say that is people look at that, their computer printout, it says rakshasa, so they feel bad. So it needs to, when you learn this in Jyotish, you need to understand more thoroughly about what these things mean. I mean, people, Rakshasa nakshatras can be found in charts of very successful people because they fought their way forward. There was a bit of cruelty involved, you know. And of course, those people are highly attractive. Everyone runs after them because they're the sort of big shot types. So this is how it's normally taught. And but anyway, when it comes down to the actual analysis with these two groups, there is some suggestion in the data that matching Rakshasa woman with a Deva or Manushya male is marginally connected to happiness, but it's marginal. So really, there isn't much evidence for the utility of this particular test. Then we come to Nadi. Now, Nadi has the largest score. So you either have Nadi or you don't. Some of the others, there's gradations, but in Nadi, it's either you get a score of 0 or a score of 8. So out of 36, 8 makes a big difference. So it's a kind of critical test. And the whole concept that there are 3 Nadis. Now, this could be thought in terms of Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, perhaps, but it's often presented as more related to Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. But generally, it's accepted that the middle one is kind of hot. So it said, okay, don't put the 2 hot people together. Maybe hot, and hot is, you know, cooking. Maybe it's good, but you know, the general thing is don't put the 2 hot ones together. In fact, they should be different. That's the idea. There should be some kind of difference here. And you know, this is interesting. So let's have a look at this in more detail. Now, I should say that all of these tests have small variations in different parts of India, like the scoring schemes. If you see the table, it's mostly the same, and there's 1 or 2 differences here and there, depending on which part of India is the writer is coming from. But it doesn't make a substantial difference. I tried them all. And it didn't make a substantial difference. So here's an example of the Nadi results. So what you see is that the H group, that's the happy group. So 41% had a 0 score and 58% got a score of 8. So not really a very large difference for the happy group. But you look at the bitter group, only 23% got a 0 score and 77% got a full score of 8. So this is actually a rather clear and significant difference where the couples that were fighting actually had this Nadi score. They got the score of 8, and it definitely didn't help them. So we have to be a bit cautious, because when we look at these results, we see that more often than not, they're working in the opposite direction to what is actually expected from the text. So in summary, we can see that there's no real evidence that the Kuta score system is useful for determining marital happiness. Now, it may determine other things. I'm not saying it's useless or anything, but all I'm saying is that, you know, as astrologers and with people coming to us for matching, don't just look at the Kuta table and say something. That would be a serious mistake. You know, we should know exactly what we're doing, and we should know what what is the purpose? What are we trying to establish? You know, don't just think high Kuta score everything will be rosy. This is a mistake that is being made, I think, on a daily basis by some astrologers in India. So we shouldn't fall into that. So let's quickly look at these additional protons: Mahendra, Sri, Dirga, Raju, and Veda. These all tend to be some variations on the previous ones, but they're treated as separate. So Mahendra is connected to Tarabala, but it's actually contradictory to it in some respects. So it says certain places for the boys, nakshatra relative to the girls, are considered good. And some of these are not considered good in the Tara system. But anyway, there was no effect. There was a small trend in the opposite direction. So that's fine. Then the Sri Dirga. So the boys' nakshatra should be more than a certain number of stars ahead of the girls. So some people say 7, some people say 9, some people say 13. Different texts stretch it or contract it. But only the 13 plus method has a slight, but it's not significant effect on the two groups. So this again is there's no real importance to this test. There's small, very minor evidence for it. We can't say it's scientifically amounts to anything. Then there's Raju, it means a rope. So this is supposed to show the longevity of the husband. So in some parts of India, this is the first thing and perhaps the only thing they test. I don't know. I mean, I know there are some very good astrologers. I'm not running everybody down, but we also hear a lot of complaints, especially from some of our famous saints, about the things that are going on in matchmaking in India. So we should understand very clearly the situation. So basically, the nakshatras are put in two groups, a number of groups, and the two people shouldn't come from the same group. This is not, I have not done any study on longevity. It's just about happiness. And as far as happiness is concerned, it's not having any effect, right? We can leave it open about the longevity. And then there's Veda. It's a kind of aspect. Normally Veda is like said to be piercing or aspecting. And again, the Pandits have created a scoring table between the nakshatras of the pair. And this also doesn't relate in any way to marital happiness in this particular study. So we can say none of Mahendra, Sri, Dirga, Raju, and Veda speak to the happiness of the couples in this study. But this doesn't rule out their usefulness for other areas, just to say that. Once again, one should not use these tests unless one has evidence for their usefulness for the intended purpose. I mean, don't do things just because you found it in some book. Study the thing, not with 2 or 3 charts. That doesn't tell you anything. You need to do like Sarbani was doing, large number of charts. And look for cases where it's not working and then try to understand that chart. Of course, there's, as all the other speakers have mentioned, there are so many factors that we have to consider. This is just one thing, but this gets a lot of weight in some places. All right, so let's have a quick look at Kuja dosha. So Kuja means bad birth. That's one of the not nice names for Mars. We like Mangala. Mangala means auspicious, but Kuja is not a nice word. So it refers to the negative effects of Mars. So Mars has many positive effects, such as courage. In fact, nothing gets done without Mars. But on the negative, when you want to get something done and somebody gets in your way to any extent, you can become impatient, you can become angry. And, it's a kind of macho energy, definitely. So some people may say it's related to testosterone. Nothing wrong with that. So Mars is essential for yoga. It helps a person remain celibate. But sometimes Mars's effect is strong enough that it forces you to be celibate, because you are too angry to get together with anybody. So this is the problem. So it's clear that passion requires Mars. And passion requires Mars. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything, are you? So Mars is essential in relationships. But the question is, how much? Because if there's too much fire, the water dries up. So you start off full of passion, and after a while, you don't know what you're doing anymore in the relationship. So we can say there's a kind of lust versus love thing. Mars helps with the lust, definitely. But if it's too strong, like if someone has too much in their system, one person isn't enough. You know, how even well-intended, they find themselves distributing their energies amongst many people, and that's usually destroys the relationship. And if there's too little, obviously nobody's going to stay with the person. In most cases, that also breaks it. So there needs to be some kind of intermediate strength of Mars. So it does make sense to analyze Mars to see how possible a stable relationship can be. So the Kuja dosha is this, whoever the rishis or whoever it was, it just define certain houses where if Mars is placed there, and you know, there could be things that negate this aspect of Jupiter as the most important thing, but there are various riders in the text. Some texts talk about, you know, different dignities of Mars. So, you know, there are lots of factors that can be thrown in, but a lot of people just look at the chart, they see those houses, they see where Mars is, and they say Kuja dosha. So let's think about this. There are two possibilities. There's Mars in a Kendra, 1, 4, 7. 10 is not included. Why is 10 not included? 10 is the Digvala place of Mars. It makes you into some kind of big shot. It's considered good, except that it's a very strong Mars. And if you want to live with a very strong Mars, good. I mean, it's challenging, but it's not put in the list of the Kuja dosha. Then there's the 2nd or 12th. So the 2nd or 12th have a sort of a strong effect on the Lagna. So Mars in the 1st house, the 2nd house, or the 12th, all of those create quite a lot of Mars energy in the personality. So it's considered what they say, Papa dosha. It exaggerates its influence. Then Mars in the 8th is obviously a problem, because the 8th house is to do with the stability of relationships. So however you like to explain it, these are the houses that are mentioned. Now, it can also be computed from the moon, and it can be computed from Venus. Some people insist on Venus. The only problem is that if you say it shouldn't be from the ascendant, it shouldn't be from the moon, it shouldn't be from Venus, you've already got 88% of the population having some degree of the dosha. So if those people are ruled out from marriage, well, we wouldn't have a population problem, would we? So don't get carried away by that. It's not that's too much, you know. So obviously, if we're going to consider Mars from Venus, for example, we should think, why are we doing it? There must be some reason for it, but it's not, you know, tagging on more and more reference points for the Kuja dosha. It just means the whole thing's not going to work, because just about everybody will have some degree of the dosha. I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm just saying you have to understand the use of it. Then there are also shlokas which are attributed to Brihat Parashara or a Shastra, though you don't find them in the English translations, that say you should also count Shani. And some people say only in the 7th, 8th, and 12th houses. So I know this starts to get, you know, very complicated. So I'm going to try and simplify it for you and sort this out. So then there's a debate about whether to include the Lagna, and then is it going to be different from the Lagna and from the moon? So anyway, let's see, we'll try all these things and see what has an effect on the marital happiness in our groups. So this is using the 1st, 4th, 7th, 8th, and 12th. Some people do this, they either use the 2nd house or they don't. You know, you can have 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12, or you can have 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12, or you can have 1, 4, 7, 8. These are the different options that different people take. So let's see if it makes any difference. Okay. So what we see here if I put the expected number, and then the, between in the couple, some people have no Kuja dosha. Some people, one person has the Kuja dosha, and some people, in some couples, both have the Kuja dosha. That's what we have here. And the whole idea is that, according to at least one shloka that someone says is there in the text, though, there's debate about it, that they should both have Kuja. If one has Kuja dosha, they should marry someone who has Kuja dosha. That's the thing. So we should be very cautious about such a statement. Is it working? So here we have the case. If we look at it, you see, if you take the neither case, it's pretty much as expected. Then we take one person has Kuja dosha. So in the happy group, the number is larger, see 52, but it's still about what we'd expect. But if we look at both, we see it's quite small, relatively. And maybe it's not significant, but it is a bit lower. So this does not support, it clearly doesn't support this theory about putting two Kuja dosha people together. Now, if we take the
Just
two,
about 5 minutes or so, Doctor.
yes, I'll be finished soon.
Okay, no problem.
So if we take 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12, we get basically the same result, even more exaggerated, actually. And if we take all of the 1, 2, 4, 7, 8, and 12, which is probably the preferred choice, then we see it's similar situation again. So really, overall, we see that it's more likely if you put two Kuja dosha people together, there is actually some evidence that that's not a good idea if you want the people to be happy. I mean, it's strange, but this is what the research shows. Of course, it makes some sense because one person is dysfunctional because of too much Mars, and the other person has the same problem, and they don't necessarily work it out together very well. That seems to be the problem. You'd think they'd sympathize with each other, but when Mars is strong, it's difficult to be sympathetic. That's the difficulty. So from the Lagna, the Bitter group is more likely to both have Kuja dosha. Okay, so then we checked if Kuja dosha can be checked from the Moon or Venus for marital happiness, and there was no effect at all. Nothing. So the Lagna has something going on, but the Moon and Venus actually didn't show in this particular study of these particular couples. It didn't show at all. Then we looked at the effect of Saturn in all of these 6 signs, or just taking 7, 8, and 12, and again there was no effect. Okay, no obvious effect. Now there is a system taught by Professor Jayashekhar, not Shankar, Shekhar, in his book, The Best Bet. It's a very nice little book, and he's very novel. He's got to come up with some interesting ideas, and he's got a detailed scoring system based on all the malefics. He uses all the malefics, he uses their dignities, and he uses the standard houses. And he says if a planet's in a friendly house, it has minimal negative effect, but all the other dignities have more negative energy. So that's the way he does the scoring. And it creates a malefic energy score for each person. And then the idea is to try and get them as equal as possible. And there is some, it does sort of work to some extent. So if we look at the results, no time to go into all the detail, but there was some effect, but it's not enough that you could make a decision. You can't say this couple will be happy because of these scores. It just increases the probability a little bit. That's all we can say, So it's the best thing that I found, but it still doesn't give us any, you've got to study the whole chart. You can't fall back on Kuta points and Kuja dosha. So I would like to say that Maharshi Vasishta stated that 50% of compatibility is that the couple should like each other when they meet. So that should not be forgotten. Now, good matching has done a lot of good. bad matching has done a lot of harm, enormous harm. And we should be very cautious, very, very cautious, and definitely not just use these techniques. Probably don't use them at all. Dr. B.V. Raman in his book Muhurta wrote, "It is unfortunate that throughout South India, especially in the Tamil areas, much is made of the so-called Kuja dosham, and this bugbear has been the means of destroying the happiness of many families by preventing marriages otherwise very eligible and anxiously wished for." So this is the opinion of India's greatest astrologer of recent times. So I think we should, I just want everyone to take a pause and have some caution about these techniques. So thank you. Any questions? By the way, I did a workshop on karma and marriage, and also marriage and compatibility. And these are available on my website.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foss. I really enjoyed your presentation. It was definitely a cautionary tale.
Yes, I thought it was probably time to do that.
I mean, it's really helpful, you know, because these methods that have been used for a long time, when they're looked at in a statistical study, they don't really hold up. And that's really thought-provoking, you know. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Because really, you see, the whole idea is that the astrologer should study the complete chart, and they should study it in a very, you know, profound way. I had an experience, if we got 1 minute, I was just decided to go and visit he's a very great pundit, a Jyotishi. He was living in London, and I heard about him. So I went to visit him, and it just turned out that on the day I arrived there, he just had a proposal for his daughter, and he decided to turn it down. So he mentioned this to me and showed me the chart, and I looked at the chart. I said, "Why did you turn it down?" And he said, "This, this, and this." And I looked at it. I explained to him why that was not applicable. And he was a very intelligent and good astrologer, much older than me at the time. So he saw what I was explaining and said, "Yes, okay, fine, I got it." And the couple got married. And years later, I had this wonderful letter from the daughter saying, you know, what a wonderful marriage, and they had beautiful children, and everything had been so good, and thank you so much, you know. So, you know, we have to be cautious.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for participating in the summit today, sir.
Oh, so thank you for inviting me. I'm very grateful. I think you're doing a great service having these webinars with different astrologers.
Thank you. Well, while you're here, I'll just quickly, you know, I haven't announced it formally yet, but because you're a participant, I would love to, this is my first time formally announcing that I will be hosting the Parashara Jyotish Conference, November 17th to November 21st of this year. And it's going to be a very exciting group of astrologers with the blessing of Dr. Harness, who is no longer continuing the Sedona conference, trying to carry on the passion and study of Jyotish for generations to come, and very excited to have you participating, Dr. Foss. So I just wanted to share that with the community. Anyone who stayed tuned to this point in the video gets the early scoop.
That's great. I must say that in some respects, you have some of the qualities that Dennis has that made it possible for him to be to run all these conferences all these years. So I think it's very fitting that somehow it's come to you.
Thank you.
But you know, it's wonderful you're doing this, and I hope, you know, there's big turnout.
Thank you. Thank you. This year will be virtual, and then next year we're going to be attempting to do it in person somewhere here on the East Coast of the United States.
Great.
So a lot of different locations still being looked at right now. So thank you all for all the presentations today, and I'm excited to kind of finish everything up. I'm going to be presenting on Rahu and Ketu as tools for compatibility, soulmates, twin flames, and non-traditional relationships. This is a little bit of a different method where we're just focusing on Rahu and Ketu as the primary indicators for compatibility or not having compatibility. So I'm just going to share my screen. One second. Okay, now this is the lovely group of Jyotisha that joined me today, and I am humbled to be before my teachers. And I'm very excited to discuss this method. So before I get into everything, I just want to do some chanting to Rahu and Ketu. It's important to me as I focus on the nodes that I honor them spiritually. So I will be doing a quick chant to Rahu and then a chant to Ketu, and then I will begin the presentation. Ardakayam Mahaviryam Chandradijya Vimardinam Samhita Garbha Sambutam Tam Rahu Pranamam Yaham. Ardakayam Mahaviryam Chandradijya Vimardinam Samhita Garbha Sambutam Tam Rahu Pranamam Yaham. Ardakayam Mahaviryam Chandradijya Vimardinam Samhita Garbha Sambutam Tam Rahu Pranamam Yaham. Om Brahm Brim Brahm Saharahave Namaha. 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 Om Palas Puspa Sankasham Taraha Grahamastakam Radram Rajatikam Goram Tam Ketu Pranamam Yaham. Palas Puspa Sankasham Takara Grahamastakam Radram Radatikam Goram Tam Ketu Pranamam Yaham. Palas Puspa Sankasham Takara Grahamastakam Radram Radatikam Goram Tam Ketu Pranamam Yaham. Om Kram Krim Kram Sahakitave Namaha. 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 Hari Om Om Namah Shivaya. So I will be discussing Rahu and Ketu as compatibility for soulmates, twin flames, and non-traditional relationships. And this is kind of a fun or exciting presentation because sometimes I get emails as an astrologer and some of them say, is this person my twin flame? Will you do a reading for us? And, it's kind of a little new age kind of thinking of the partnership as the twin flame. And we'll elaborate on that, but I'll do the traditional soulmate relationship as well as the non-traditional relationships. And we can see a lot of manifestations of those through Jyotish. So I really believe that Rahu and Ketu are excellent tools to determine compatibility, and many things can be ascertained from the nodal connections in the chart. In this elaboration, I will discuss the aspects of the chart to focus on when using Rahu and Ketu to determine aspects of compatibility and what types of relationships manifest dependent on certain nodal aspects between the two charts. So that's basically what we're getting into. So there's a lot of different comparative aspects when using the nodes, but I'm just going to focus on 4 primary ways to kind of approach it, and then the different criteria I use. So in this compatibility, we use the chart 1 Rahu position and exchanges with the chart 2 in some way. Also, the native chart 1 K2 position, how that exchanges in the natives chart. And then you have the same thing happening with the second native exchanging with chart 1. So we're really looking at Rahu and Ketu's influence on both charts from this compatibility aspect. And the criteria for judging these aspects is planetary relationships, friends, enemies, neutral relationships, and maybe some of the gray area in between. Planetary dignity, right? Exaltation, debilitation, mula trikona. And then nakshatra lord from a planetary perspective, one of the Navagrahas, the nakshatra devata, so the actual deity which rules over the nakshatra, I kind of like to use to judge this. And of course, the Jyotir Vidya, which is the great wisdom of Jyotish, which moves through us when we take our ego outside of this situation we call life. So soulmate manifestation, how do we kind of start to see a soulmate manifest? Now, a lot of the astrologers today pointed out something very important. You can't just use one method. Just because Rahu and Ketu is matching up, it doesn't mean that it's not working out, you know, just because it will work out. Like, you can't just depend on Rahu and Ketu. You have to look at all of the Navagrahas and use as many methods as possible. But we're just focusing on Rahu and Ketu because you can find some really interesting things that are very deep about using Rahu and Ketu here. So soulmate manifestation can be clearly ascertained. This is one of the clear things I use to find this. It's just one indicator. When Rahu in native's chart exchanges favorably with the nodal compatibility criteria. So if you go back a slide, this is the criteria, all of these 5 different criterias for kind of judging it. When one person's Rahu is exchanging favorably in another person's chart using that criteria, it can create this kind of soulmate energy. Soulmates pejoratively understood in the context of this lifetime, like, how am I thinking to what is a soulmate? It's a deep question, but we have to look at it more pejoratively or pragmatically. And I'm looking at soulmate energy as can be seen as 2 souls whose karmic debts intermingle. What, right? The contract of the relationship creating a mixing of the karmic debt. And sometimes that karmic debt can harmonize in a beautiful way, especially when we're looking at this through the Rahu Ketu. Is your karmic debt, can you fulfill that karmic debt with each other? It's a deep question, but I think that's what a soulmate is, you know, you two are helping each other through your karmic debt. Hopefully, at least then it's a healthy type of relationship that could be spiritually evolutionary and yet sustainable for a lifetime when you're working through each other's debt and supporting each other through that process. So this is an example. So let's say native 1 has Rahu and Satyabhishak in the 7th house, and then that is going to exchange with native 2 Saturn Satyabhisha ascendant, right? Because then you're having the Rahu ruled nakshatra exchange, you're having a 1-7 exchange. You're also having an exchange between Rahu and Saturn, which are, you know, considered akin and friendly to each other. So this could definitely show a soulmate connection, especially on a 1-7 axis. 5 and 7 also being important for activation here. So twin flame manifestation. Now, I really wanted to try to define what a twin flame is and try to kind of how to see it in the chart, because it's kind of like this new age kind of thing, but is there something to it? And I think there is. So the twin flame manifestation can be clearly ascertained when Ketu, now we're focusing on Ketu, in a native's chart exchanges in an exaggerated fashion with Rahu or Ketu in chart 2. Now, if you're not sure what exaggerated fashion, there's a great astrologer, Alan Anand, who talks about it's a Heart Defoe kind of lineage of planets or certain things being in an exaggerated condition. And that can mean retrograde, you know, same sign, not really same sign, but exalted, debilitated. So here we're looking at Ketu exchanging in an exaggerated way with Rahu or Ketu specifically in another native's chart. So we there has to be a Rahu, there has to be Ketu exchanging with Rahu or Ketu in this exaggerated way. And then you can kind of see this twin flame manifestation. But what is a twin flame? What is a twin flame? What does that even mean? How is a twin flame different than a soulmate? So I believe pejoratively that we can look at twin flames can be seen as 2 souls whose lessons are extremely similar. That's all a twin flame is. When you break it down, you have the same lessons, or they're very extremely similar. Why twin flame relationships are generally not sustainable is this next fact, where generally varying levels of evolution exist in these lessons, right? So if there's another soul in this world that has the same lessons as you would be attracted to that. But depending on where you are in the lessons, both in this lifetime, where you're progressing, it could be very volatile. It could be very butt heads kind of energy. And that's even described as in the twin flame relationship, even though it's attractive. It's this energy of, just because we have the same lessons, that's not always a good thing, because hopefully one person, if it could cause a self-destructive or a mutually destructive kind of relationship. So you do got to be careful with the twin flame relationship. But if two souls are on the similar path, and in the same kind of place with their lessons, you can grow together. And I think that could be positive, but I would say it's rare. An example of how to see this, native one has Ketu in Swati, as in the ascendant. So Ketu, Swati ascendant. And the native two has Rahu in Swati in the 7th house. So now you're both seeing Ketu exchanging with that Rahu in the second chart, with the Rahu in also Rahu's nakshatra. So there's all these nodal influences indicating a possible twin flame. Non-traditional manifestation of relationships. So non-traditional relationships, this is a broader topic because there's lots of different non-traditional relationships, right? There's polyamory, there's polygamy, there's all sorts of different, especially in this modern world we live in, there's new things coming out every day. So we have to understand that the non-traditional manifestation, it can definitely be ascertained in the chart. So how do we ascertain it? So when Rahu and Ketu, Rahu or Ketu, or maybe both, in native one's chart, exchanges with chart 2 grahas. So we have to see the exchange of Rahu and Ketu on chart 2 grahas and their position. Depending on that planetary exchange, it can create a challenge in a traditional manifestation of relationship, but a real benefit in a focus of a non-traditional relationship. It can benefit that. So you have to understand, if you're set up for a non-traditional relationship, that it's possible that you might want to consider that. And what are the different possibilities, So non-traditional relationships, again, I try to define them as I get into the method, can be seen as two souls whose connection is influenced to manifest in a non-traditional way. That's just a definition, but kind of what do I mean by that? It's outside of monogamy and heterosexual marriage. So monogamy and heterosexuality are seen as kind of traditional concepts. So non-traditional might break outside of those. So for example, native one has Rahu and Ardra in the 5th bhava, which exchanges with chart 2 Rahu in Mula ascendant, right? So now we're seeing a 5 and ascendant 5 exchange, where there's Rahu in a Rahu nakshatra, and now we have Rahu in a Ketu nakshatra, and they're exchanging. So I've seen that to be the truth. So I just quickly have a couple examples that I'm going to discuss with you, just a few things that I'm going to look at. This is my wife and I, Agradevi, Rachel, and just using the kind of soulmate method. First, we'll use my Rahu, which is in Satabhishak nakshatra. So how would that be? So that's in Aquarius. So we're seeing Rahu in Aquarius here. So how is that impacting my wife's chart? So she has Saturn, it's in Dhanista, it's in the earlier degrees of Aquarius, but still Saturn in Aquarius, Rahu exchanging with Saturn, and we know that planetary relationship is favorable. So at first glance, we're seeing already a favorable exchange here of a Rahu on Saturn and in her 5th house, possibly creating some kind of soulmate connection if you're just focusing on Rahu here. So that's one perspective of it. And then you can look at the depositor of Rahu too, because Rahu is in Aquarius, which is Saturn. Saturn is in Sagittarius, and then she has a stellium in Sagittarius. So you can also look at the depositor relationship to see the other layers. Now we'll take a look at her Rahu and see how it's interacting with mine. So her Rahu is in Anuradha Nakshatra in the 2nd bhava. So we have to, so that's in Scorpio. I don't have Anuradha positions, but I do have Jyeshta positions. So now her Rahu is interacting with my Mercury and Sun. Now, Rahu-Sun interaction, that can be actually considered somewhat kind of challenging, but it still is indicating this gravitational pull there. And what's cool about this, when you're looking at Rahu, things to be fulfilled, now we're seeing an Artha activation of the second house and an Artha activation of the 10th house here. So there is an Artha exchange. So that could be something that is helping us fulfill that debt to each other in terms of Artha. And we're both very hard workers, and we can see the growth in our careers, you know, and we support each other in that. So, and then Rahu interacting with a friendly Mercury here. I think Rahu does friendly with Mercury, creating a more favorable soulmate connection. So that's how Rahu is kind of dancing between my wife and I's chart using that first kind of soulmate method. Now for twin flames. Now, my parents are probably not going to be too happy that I chose them for this. But I think it's a good method, because when I thought about twin flames, I never necessarily thought that my parents, but when I did some of this astrological research, it seems that they have some of this twin flame energy. You know, Simon mentioned it earlier in one of his things, which is the Sama Dasha, which is the similarity of Dasha. And you can see that similarity of the nodes and their position influencing this kind of twin flame energy, because you're coming in with in a similar time with similar lessons, especially generationally, that you have to experience. So, but my parents are divorced, and the important reason why I did this twin flame thing is because, oh, is twin flame great? Is it always sustainable? It actually has a difficult to sustain, because at some point in the relationship, one person is growing more than the other, and then the twin flame energy isn't as functional anymore. But here, if we're looking at K2's position, we're seeing my mother's K2, and then we're seeing the exaggerated condition here. We're seeing an exaggerated condition of Saturn and K2 within a degree of each other. And then also Saturn is in retrogression. So Saturn is in retrogression, is, you know, so then that energy of Saturn and K2 here is moving to my father's second bhava. Okay, so now there's a seventh bhava and second bhava interaction. So these are, so it's a twin flame. And this is the marriage for my mom in the seventh house, but it's more of an Artha, it's more of a family, it's more of a wealth energy for my father. So initially that energy was very aligned, you know, when starting a family, but you know, in my teenage years, it kind of went in different directions. So, and then they got divorced when I was a late teenager. So this energy of the Saturn K2 being both in the same constellation, the same Rashi of Capricorn there, not really being too favorable. You know, the twin flame energy, though, they were inseparable. You know, they thought they were soulmates, but this is a twin flame energy, Saturn K2 Capricorn, Saturn K2 Capricorn, and you're also not seeing a favorable house exchange between the seventh and the second. So we're not looking at a favorable house exchange there, plus the exaggerated condition of Saturn as a retrograde planet and conjunction with K2. You can always bring in Rahu to kind of look at it too. And you see that the Rahu ascendant for my mother goes into the 8th house for my father. So the 1-8 axis for the twin flame energy, it could be very strong. But again, I don't necessarily see it as sustainable. And yet knowing the twin flames, the energy that they created together was very beautiful, and they had many good years. But twin flames can be a challenging relationship. So non-traditional relationship, this is a case study that I did. These were people that got married and were in a normal monogamous relationship with each other and had some children, and then they opened to polyamory. And then they were in this really non-traditional relationship, and then they got divorced, but they're still best friends. So this is a real non-traditional relationship. And it's a great example to kind of use to understand, well, maybe they're co-host, they're co-raising these parents together, their children together in a really positive way. And you can see that when we're going to look at the chart here. So you have to understand that the non-traditional is not negative, because better that even if they're not compatible romantically for each other, that they help raise those children together in a beautiful way. It's extremely important. So we're just going to be looking at these Rahu Ketu exchanges. So here we're having in Amber's chart a Rahu Saturn Leo, which is the 11th house energy going into his ascendant. So there's no planetary exchanges going on there from her Rahu to his ascendant. Then we're looking at Ketu in Aquarius here. And K2 is in the 5th house. So it's automatically activating that kind of potential for non-traditional energy, just having that K2 in the 5th. And then that's moving over to his 7th house and exchanging with Mars. K2 and Mars, favorable exchange, and it's 5th house, 7th house. 5th house could represent the children energy for Amber as the mother, helping he helped her to become a mother, but the K2 hitting her Mars in the 7th house would say that maybe the marriage was not sustainable, but they're still best friends. They interact with each other all the time. And you can see that the non-traditional relationship works. So we're seeing that kind of hit with K2 and Mars here. Let's look at Idris's Rahu. So his Rahu is conjunct with Moon in Sagittarius. And the Sagittarius is on Amber's Venus. So we have to understand that the impact of Rahu on Venus could be very, tantric and evolutionary. But again, that's not necessarily sustainable. A Rahu Venus might not seem like the best energy for marriage, but I know that they had a good sex life when they were married. So it kind of, it did help at a time, and shows the non-traditional relationship that they can still grow with each other. Even if they're not married, they can still be these supportive friends with each other. And his K2 is in Gemini, which is the 9th house. So not really hitting on these aspects, but we saw with her K2 on his Mars, and we saw with his Rahu on her Venus, these kind of non-traditional indications. So just in summary, Rahu and Ketu's condition and position is a fantastic tool to be used in compatibility and can show deep aspects that other forms of synastry do not. The nodal method of synastry can be used to specify the type of romantic union two people are most likely to establish, such as soulmate, twin flame, non-traditional, and maybe there's more too. These are the 3 that I've looked at and tried to develop some research on. But knowing this can be helpful for determining, well, I'm supposed to be in this kind of relationship, but what's really best in my chart, especially when I bring this other person's energy into it. So on a deeper level, sometimes the relationship between our nodes can show how our spiritual evolution lines up with the person we're romantically interacting with, and whether that spiritual evolution creates sustainability in the partnership, right? It can create a hot and heavy energy, but is that sustainable? The nodal synastry can show past life connections, but that isn't always favorable compatibility. If you've ever dated one of your ex-girlfriends or ex-boyfriends, then you realize it's not good to date your ex-girlfriends or boyfriends. So why would you want to do it in the next life too? Through this method, with understanding your relationship proclivity through Rahu and Ketu, you can determine what type of relationship is most compatible between you and another person, as well as the inherent sustainability of the partnership. So thank you for letting me present that Rahu Ketu, soulmates, twin flames, and non-traditional relationships. Thank you so much. So I will just concluding, unless there's any final remarks, I'll just do a quick concluding chant. I'd like to thank all of the astrologers for participating today. Sarbani Rath, Simon Chokoisky, Vanita Lenka, Dr. Andrew Foss. It's so good to be here with all of you, and thank you for all the participants in the webinar. Everyone's information will be in the description of the video, all of the participating astrologers. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bunaktu, Saha Viryang Karavavahe, Tejasvina Vaditamastu, Ma Vidvashavahe. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.